Mhm. Hello, Troy. Hello. What do you call that thing back there? That kitty
Oh
with
yeah,
the
I was just looking that up as well. I mean, the official name is like Mikito.
echidnia.
Well, you're
Aikido?
talking about the waving cat is called
Yeah.
a Maneki Niko, the Japanese
Maniki.
figure, which is bringing good luck. It's got
Uh-huh.
batteries in there. I just put new batteries in, so its
Oh, good
arm
for
would
you.
wave. And
You
then we
should put
have,
a yo-yo in its hand,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
All right.
And then
Speaking of yo-yos, I would like to pick up where we left off yesterday
sure,
with our Tales of the Kraken
yeah,
and point out to anyone who is interested or has been listening or is living in the future and has gone back into the past to see how all of this developed, some of the stepping stones, um, and see where we're going. But we're developing um, maybe some, not but some business play, right?
mhm,
Might be more appropriate as we define what play means, as in playful, as in having fun, as in discovery, as in figuring ourselves out within the scope of life, I guess, because this thing is turning into a kind of episodic forum in some ways of not just telling a story. And of course, the pressure is tremendous, Troy. To tell something interesting, fill it with spikes and curves and disasters and celebrations and everything else,
mhm.
to trace what I can only call is maybe a semi-fictional narration of the tales of the Kraken, the octopus. And after that general introduction that we went through yesterday, I believe I set the stage that we should continue for the time being, at least, in Paro Bhutan,
Sure.
because we're talking about setting the stage with this Kraken and what it can do and what it has done. And then we introduce the divine madman, who is called Drukpa, as I understand. So we're going to call him Drukpa, but we're going to call the character, you, Troy, we're going to call you Troy, right?
Sure.
So without further ado, whether we're going to publish this or not will depend on how well it goes. So, but I'll read it from the computer screen, which is, bleaching this side of my face. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. And here we go.
Great.
This Aussie was named Troy, as in Helen of. The survivors of that state founded Rome, that went on to defeat Greece, as told in the Aeneid by Virgil. What comes around goes around, It does not assert a time frame, by the way. One must suffer the vicissitudes of time, which, as we all know with this fellow Einstein, is highly flexible with or without light. What then was time? An ever-present moment, and now, a past, no future, no past, no future, a measurement of movement. What was the interpretation of measurement of movement? Images from one position to the next, which can never exist because the moment it is something, it is then something else. Non-existence, in another sense, highly complex or just impacted because of all the poorly defined predecessors, like in law, where one poor law leads to a sequence of others within the law until it is completely disassociated with any sense of reality, of presence. And movement is a measure of existence, image, if you will, a fleeting registration or passage in an otherwise convoluted assembly of do's and don'ts, an impression in the mind. And if it does not move, It does not exist and is therefore eternal. There in Paro, on the streaming water's edge, sat this palace and a tent in which this unholy alliance was formed. Digital space and philosophical thinking met. An original zero. Troy approached the madman, the Western version of Drukpa Kunli, and a quotation, Drukpa Kunli was not your typical bud divine Bhutan, and a well-hung Lamadist Lama was a womanizer and a liberal drinker. People called him the divine madman for his crazy antics and unique approach to Buddhism. The madman was invited to a fundraising gathering of Buddhist priests. He took the opportunity to ask one of high rank, what was Buddhism? To which he replied, no one knew. That gave the madman great liberty to express his allegiance in a different manner. At table with others and his wife, he was told that Buddhists do not believe, they know. It was a rather scientific answer, he thought. The wife took the time to praise the uplifting penis. When it is so, a man is inspired, he creates. The madman agreed. He loved his upright penis. She was right. Erection was a good thing. She spoke her mind in a manner unfamiliar to them in the West, where women hated men and their penises. Troy came to the madman after his speech and complimented him. Drukpa, the winged dragon, was happy to meet with someone who had listened to the content of his speech. There had been one come to mind when previously, there had been one came to mind when previously he had read from the Bible at the Church of St. Anne in Brooklyn Heights. It was at a wedding of his friend. He spent the night before studying the content so he could read it in such a way as to display its message. He too had been surprised that in not reading it the way others did with the up and down cadence normally applied to anyone reading a poem, there was meaning in his speech, if anyone had cared to listen. In Brooklyn, they did, a few anyway, like now in Paro. He wasn't speaking in the usual la 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 of the common, all but eloquent tongue. If he had something to say, he would say it. Why not? It was for him too, after all. Wandering the streets and byways of Paro produced wares of which a few were Bhutanese, and the rest a mishmash of crap from India. The results of a population gone mad amid the propagandity of sanctity of life in a maggot-like lie. Something about the economic formula definitely gone viral, capturing the minds of wall-to-wall people that spilled over into Bhutan to perform work with their hands that no self-respecting Bhutanese would do. But that was everywhere, not just in the confines of workers on a temporary visa. Maggots with a hammer was not a dignified approach to life where overdetermination was status quo. He tried not to let the environs determine his activities. Women had become baby makers responsible for the replenishing of the workforce, hammers not included, opinions forbidden. Drukpa watched people. He tried not to interfere in the puzzling mass of their goings-on. That was difficult not to do. He was a meddler. He was opinionated. He was curious. If he had been a sea creature, he would surely have been an octopus. 8 arms, each with a mind of its own, leading to a mother spot called a head that fastened them all together. There were times when he was beyond control of himself, when the fairer creatures sought his comfort before they tried to manipulate him into performing their desires. He was fascinated by sex, by the intimacy and the head's service to collectively joining the disparate parts into a whole. That was sex for him, and he sought it whenever and wherever it was available. In Bhutan, that had resulted in images of his penis being plastered all over the walls of houses and homes. No, that isn't that. No, not that it wasn't flattering, because it was, but public display of his intimate part. Okay, inspiration, like the lady said. His Buddhist thoughts were not to argue, a certain waste of time and energy, not to interfere, but to observe and listen and hear what one was saying, even the birds and the bees. He was attuned to nature, and it brought him peace. Already it was clear that traditional Buddhism was a fake, the same way Christianity and Judaism and Islam were, all the others, that more resembled politics than the spirit, which they didn't even bother to define. He was careful to believe that words were limitations. When placed together in a string, they defined a thought. Thoughts defined actions, and actions defined people. There were people of little action, the complainers. There were people of gross action, with those of refined action. His was the latter. He spent much time in preparation, rounding his way around visions of his actions and what they would bring. His experience in Russia had taught him long in preparation, short in execution. Russia had also taught him, don't be in a hurry. He liked that better than the Buddhists' right timing, or the other Western command, be patient. That whole Western rigmarole was so two-sided, something he called dualism, where everything was in opposition with something. The whole monotheistic bullshit rubbed him the wrong way. Of course, it was the bastardized version of the Anunnaki, which that little bastard Abraham had ripped off in Ur. He was still a problem today, but more on that later. Dualism, which is to say right, wrong, good, bad, debt repayment, was in conflict with Eastern thought that juxtaposed punishment with enlightenment, the superior choice. The West offered heaven, hell. He offered freedom. But he isn't playing by the rules, you would say. What rules? Rules are made to be broken. Rules are guidelines in the same way that laws are suggestions. Whose life is it anyway? He effused attraction like a sparkler does sparks. The West was inadequate, sorely inadequate when compared with freedom. With their minds primed, they sat ready to oppose him. That's what they do. They bark. He had learned early that if a bad thought had wiggled its way into his mind, he could simply ignore it and it would lose its effectivity. It would affect his mental and emotional stability, except to improve it. It wouldn't affect it. These mind parasites were energy seekers. In a play he had written earlier, he spoke about nanochips. These were flat black wafer aliens from space that floated down to Earth and sought people to inhabit. They disguised themselves as emotion, much in the same way bad thoughts do. Emotions were sensed as emotional reactions, and the more attention he gave to them, the more they grew, thus refueling themselves and encouraging people to indulge in them, giving the nanos a fine meal, allowing them to shed any notion of going elsewhere. Controlling them was a little like letting a subject near death, die, so that or near death, so that the parasites would leave the body, allowing the body to recover. That took control and bravery and ability. Drukpa had once taught a university class on ethics. In exploring different ways of thinking, he asked the class to allow themselves to believe one set of ethics, nothing too terrible, as they went through it. Abandon your way of thought for the duration of the class. Allow yourself to believe what the system teaches. No one would or could do it, not even for a minute. He thought that was strange. For him, it was easy. Try it on for size. See if it can fit, and abandon it at the end of class. No one accepted the challenge but him. He's done that continuously for his whole life. Perhaps his facility to adapt at the drop of a hat was why he had enjoyed theatrics so much. He was a real movie star, one that the director of a major motion picture asked him to return to Hollywood. He turned down the offer. This had happened before when he left New York. Same thing. They want you when they can't have you. That offer came from MTV. Nope, off to San Fran. In LA, he learned two things. What have you done for me lately? And nobody comes to LA to give. In New York, it was, how do you say fuck you in New York? The answer, have a nice day. In LA, trust me. I'm going to keep going on if it's okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Okay. On Earth, the pressure was growing. He could feel the insistence that the atmosphere had. Do this, don't do that, was in the very air. There was no relaxation, just people pushing people. Bhutan was a little less, however. It was as it was because India, sitting there to the south with nukes and many, many, many people, each some sovereign nation of a sort. And what? He picked that up in Russia. And what? What a powerful comeback. It stunned people. They had no reply to, and what? He liked that, like a viper. So here he was at the Global Happiness Conference in Paro. Here was an interested victim. Walked up to him, threw himself on the altar, and handed Drukpa the flint knife. Yeah, filet. No, wait. He was a passageway, a guide to the underworld of the subconscious mind. Numbers, electrical impulses, energizers, messages, instructions, transitions. Oh, give it a try. You don't have anything planned anyway. There it was again, that voice inside of his head talking to him. Now it was a dialogue. All right, tell me why. It's wanted. How so? The world is crumbling like coral and bleach. Startup, fizzy. Digitizing. That's the way to come. He's perfect. Well, we'll see. See what? Troy? The Greeks have sacked the place. He's set sail. He'll cross the Rubicon. There will be, where will you be? Is this the Aeneid or what? Or not? Get out there and build a city on 7 hills. Then go kick the asses of the ones who made this mess of your world and the world. That's what you're here for. Control all the money in the world. You don't have to own it. You don't want to own it. It'll change. It always does. That's your mission. Control all the money in the world. Let's start by defining what money is. Sure. I've got some ideas I borrowed from a friend. Shoot.
That's it. Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Comments are welcome. Yes, you in the peanut gallery. Troy. Your name is Troy too.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's so rich, I think, with I guess insight, messages, analogies, reality. It's all combined together, and history of ancient stories together with, a real life incident. So it's yeah, just I think a little, it's a lot there. I couldn't really absorb it all because of that. I think there was so much, so rich. It was like, okay, I need it to go slower. What did you say? Okay, can I read that again? And then, but yeah, as a piece, I think it's like still a little bit to be polished in terms of for me to flow and to listen to it and hear that flow and okay, where are we now? And then okay, now I can see where we're headed and where we've come from. But I think as a piece written down, that would be more apparent and more easy for me to absorb. So everything, I mean, it's artwork. It's like poetry and a story mixed together, and that's what I can, I guess, yeah, comment on at this point.
You know, let me tell you some things that puzzled me in the process and are still puzzling me. But I thought, you know, the editing for me doesn't begin until I read it out loud.
Okay.
I hear it for myself.
Sure.
Right? And this was the first time I have done that.
Right.
It was a rather busy day here. And it's like to say long in preparation, short in execution, right? Because I would not say that I'm one to sit and think about what I'm going to write.
No.
Never.
Sure.
Never. No, it's kind of like I know when it's going to rain because I can feel it. Right. I don't have to look at Google, who has a terrible record, by the way. And so I think, okay, I'm ready to write this down. And there's no, it's not overt. It's a feeling, I would say, for talking about this for the first time in my life to someone else. It's difference between I'm ready and the publicized version that we see all too often, which I think is incorrect, is that writer's block. You know, I've never had writer's block. And I think part of that comes from when I see an obstacle, I work my way around it. It may mean that I have to go back and edit it, or that I don't like it, or usually I'm squirming around, figuring out how I can make this work. I remember in college, in undergraduate, you know, I was writing for some stuff. I took a creative writing class with the guy who wrote Flim Flam Man. And I was writing and I was thinking of poetry and whatever. I've always done that. And I said to myself, okay, something wants to come out. So let it.
Yeah.
That's one of the other great difficulties, I think, in being a writer or writing, not being a writer, because you're only a writer when you're writing, right?
Right.
After that, you're a waiter or a sales clerk or something like that. But it would come out and then I would look at it and think, can I make this fit? Or why did it come out the way that it did? And where is that leading me? It's kind of like a game of checkers, right? Somebody moves forward and you move, and the object is to win the game, right?
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that I have to know where I'm going. I think maybe it's an exercise in flexibility, because I'm a firm believer that everything is going to work out anyway.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Even if it's not the way that I thought it would, right? So I can, you know, it's like dancing, right? Nietzsche said, you know, I don't believe in a God that can't dance. Okay, well then, let's dance and let's see for my own self. And I've never been a dancer. I've been more or less impulsive, right? When it comes to like learning the steps of a dance, I can't do it. But if I start dancing, then it's easier while I'm dancing to learn the steps.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
think it's the same thing with writing. At least it is for me. I'm not trying to
Exactly.
define, what writing is all about.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to have a conversation with Mark Twain, or Steinbeck, or one of those guys who has a sense of humor about what happens when they write.
Right.
Because it's amazing. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's amazing when anybody can write something that stands on its own 2 feet.
Exactly.
And I believe, with some editing and the mention that you did of it's better to read it. I'm not opposed to that than it is to speak it, right? But in the same sense, the word play sticks in my mind, and in a lot of ways, when I introduce, Drukpa having thoughts, he engages in a conversation with himself, which turns it into a dialogue,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So his thinking is a dialogue where
Mm-hmm.
he's asking questions and giving himself answers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then his free mind is principally saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, well, yeah, but then we go into an analogy, right? We're talking about the Odyssey. We're talking about the Aeneid, right? We're talking about all kinds of other stuff that other people may not know because they may not have read them.
Sure.
But I think it's, if you graduate from Columbia, I think you have to read the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid,
right.
Before they give you your diploma.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't graduate from Columbia. I don't have that much money, or didn't have that much money at the time. I just lived in New York, on a warehouse floor, and learned some stuff that way.
Mm-hmm.
So incorporating what I call the skating rink, right, into your storytelling.
Right.
Imagine you're in Central Park, and thank you, Donald Trump. They have a skating rink and also Rockefeller Center. And you look at it and it's like all these people, some people are rather fluid. Other people are on the ice for the first time, right? Some people fall, other people, twirl around like a top, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that in the sidewalks as well, or the subways, or whatever it is that's going on. It's all like, writing.
Right.
And your story is where you look and how you relate to things and so on. And you end up at the end of the day going back to your flat, if you have one, and for our purposes you do, and trying to figure out what that day meant to you. I was in New York, and I decided I would take a day book, and every day I would write down an impression that I had.
Right.
It would come to me anytime during the day, in a subway, back home, whatever it was I was doing. Thought would come, I would write it down. And the one I remember the most was, you have to be in New York for a year before you know why you're there. Right.
Yeah.
Or actually, now that I've said it, it means if you have to be in New York for a year before you know if you really want to be there.
Right.
Right. I think that's closer to what I wrote. And it's the same thing when you're writing. You're setting a stage. You're saying, okay, great. It's like a dream, a waking dream.
Sure.
And then you move your chess pieces around, in an attempt to create some sense of flow.
That's right.
And you're the chess master.
Okay.
It's your board.
Great.
And making a clever move can win you a chess match.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Or making a not so clever move can end your career as a chess player.
Sure.
I've seen that in the little park around the New York Library, Metropolitan Library. But anyway, so you take all those little bits and pieces, and you can't really reassemble them. But if you look at it through your own eyes, the character's eyes, then that can very easily be a chapter where you're telling, your moves during the day, whether you reach a conclusion or not. Then you go to sleep, to bed. If you can sleep, fine. If not, we'll sleep eventually. Then you let that sit, because you don't have to write the next day. You write when you're ready to
Right.
write, when you've got something to say, or when the mood strikes you, right? And I think that for me at least, this whole idea of writing what I'm writing, which I've disclosed the purpose of these two characters being together, which is to control all the money in the world, not necessarily to have it, because that, I think that's principally ridiculous. You know, there have been so many characters in history who everything they touched turned to gold, and what, there it is again, you know, the and what, which is a real puzzler. And then to use all of that information to draw some kind of a conclusion, or at least ask yourself, have you taken a step up or a step down? Are you in the subway, or are you going down to the subway? One way or the other. It's not good or bad, but that has to lead somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, you're going to want to see Wall Street. You're going to want to see Uptown. You're going to want to see downtown, the Battery Park, whatever it is, you know, Brooklyn, the bridge, walk across the bridge, all that sort of stuff. Keeping in mind, what are you doing? It can be just as simple as saying, you know, a day in New York. You know, then you got yourself the little short story, right?
Yeah.
And then when you start stacking the deck, then you're pulling people along, saying to them, if I have your interest, let me try and keep it. And then also define to you why you should be interested. My proposal. It doesn't mean you have to be interested, obviously, but pacing together real life experience, mythologizing it, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, creating moments where tragedy and comedy and whatever and interplay, and breaking the rules by introducing, like Nietzsche said, master slave. Well, you know, my thought was, it's duality. Why do I have to go that route? Why can't I go free man? You know, I'm not interested in being a master, and I'm not interested in being a slave.
Sure.
And I think that, if I may be so bold, I think that would have shocked Nietzsche, or at least suggested a response from him about that comment. But nevertheless, it's new for me, and I feel, you know, like the owner of that. And I think in some ways, as I go through this gradient, that there are things that I'm not preaching. I'm just wanting to say that I'll share this with you because it made an impact on my life.
Sure.
And for today, it's important for me to consider, what am I doing with my life? And will this experiment clarify anything for me? And if I'm lucky, other people as well.
Yeah. So
there's a mouthful.
What? I don't know, yeah, as well, what the outcome is, or where we're headed, but it just feels like we're, you know, in the right thing. I mean, it's fun, it's enjoyable. It's like that we're getting things emerging and coming out and evolving. This storytelling aspect I really love, and not just the storytelling, but the writing that comes first. So yeah, that process that you have, and that opening to flow and not editing, just letting things come. And then, as you described, the chess pieces, you know, the components that are coming out onto the page to be strategically moved. What I love about chess, particularly when I was playing it, it was always on the computer. When I first learned, I do play on the chessboard sometimes, but when I first was introduced, it was, here's the chess app on, you know, Windows 3.1 or whatever it was, and then it had a back button. When you moved your, pawn into a spot and, oh no, that was a mistake, you could just say back. You could go back as far as you wanted. Back, 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 back. Let's not do that.
How nice.
But it, yeah, made it so much more, I don't know, entertaining, educational at the same time for me of what not to do. And because I knew that back button was there, I could just probably, played a big part in me being a programmer, because that's how I program. You program, you try it, doesn't work, okay, roll back, try this, oh yeah, that's working, keep going until you hit something that, oh no, that's not going to work, and then you just roll back to the last working version, and then you do it a different way. But yeah, this process, I think, of business play, or coming back to Datalogical Services and what we provide as a company and an organization and a collaboration and a firm or advisory firm, if we want to continue using those terms, what is it we do? And I see it like as, or one thing is letting people go through this process of writing. Okay, the benefits of that will become obvious later down the track, I believe, but this exploratory, creative, expressionist way of, just like you said, it can be a day in New York, or it can be, okay, what a significant moment was in your life, or what are you looking to achieve in the business, depending on the person that comes to us and, their situation, their environment, and allowing them and introducing them to this process of writing, letting it come out, analyzing it. I think with us as a collaboration, guiding them so they don't, get lost in anything, but we're still exploring it ourselves. So it's not like we have all the answers right now, but as we go through this and work it out ourselves, then, bring it to other people and say, this is what we do. On a bigger,
go ahead.
I just see like a book, I don't know why, but from yesterday, and I think we've talked about before, writing a book. So you talked about chapters. We've mentioned, writing on it, becoming a writer. If we have a book, the Datalogical Services book, or, and the authors, Danny Teal, Troy Sadowski, want to know what we're about, here's the book. And if we can get a book together and publish it and just say, this is our, this is us, then people will read that book and they'll say, hey, we need you to help. And whatever they need us to help, we can do. Whatever they need us to do, we can help with. And at the very least, we can introduce this process, writing, creative flow, allowing things to come down onto a piece of paper or, a keyboard, into a screen, to allow them to create what they want. And you're saying, it's like, if you can write it down, you can have it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I was just looking for the book by Nietzsche, where he, and can't understand why I can't remember the name of his book, where he's writing about the Buddha.
Right.
I remember Siddhartha, which was written by Hermann Hesse, which does principally the same thing. And what it does is it just follows the prince, principally, when he denies his privileges and goes around the world. I think it started for me when they set the scene. Okay, he has everything he wants, and then guy was out in the country and a bird flies into a field, and that's been plowed and eats a worm, you
mhm.
know, and he principally breaks down. So that started his journey,
Right.
right? Where he ended up, I think, being what was it? Not a riverboat man, but the guy who ferries people across a river, right?
Right. Right.
And I think the thing that interested me about that was it's a story about a guy as he goes through life and then reaches a conclusion, right? That
Mhm.
he does everything, you know, from whoring to uh, being learning how to make money and so on, so which is kind of could be the same thing, but you know, he goes through all of this sort of stuff, and we have a story, and in some ways, I think, and I don't know, and I don't think that Nietzsche or Hesse would agree with me on this, but it comes to the point of having a reason for having written that, right?
Mhm.
What are you doing? Because when it takes on a book form, then you feel like you have something to say to people. That's the way I look at it, right?
Right.
If you don't have anything to say to people and it's a personal journey, then no need to go through the trials of writing a book,
Right.
you know, which is the simplest part.
Okay.
Getting it published, you know, is a ball buster.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
and you may never get it published until it may never be published, and it may be published after your death. Who
Sure.
knows, right?
Sure. Sure.
So it's really, when you answer that question, that's part of the reason why you're doing, oh, I want to be famous. I think I would advise against that, right?
Mhm.
When you get 3 books, okay, then, and they're all your friends are saying it's great, you should get this published,
Mhm.
then go to get yourself an agent,
Right.
and say, I've got 3 works here and more in the works
Sure. Sure.
before you know. So there's the science of getting published, and then there are people who really don't give a damn one way or the other. I want to write it down, which is it's therapeutic,
Right.
right?
Mm.
And in a lot of ways, that's what's happening now for me, is definitely therapeutic.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm one with of course, with the internet getting published, you can do that yourself, right? All you do is get a friend like you,
Mhm.
and you know, you can do a video, or you can have this I forget the name of it, note taker, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Where it's principally turning your voice into scripted work,
That's
and
right.
that helps a lot, you know.
Mhm.
Learning, of course, along the way, never write and edit at the same time. It's 2
Mhm.
different processes,
Mhm. Mhm.
and editing while you're writing will kill everything you're doing,
Mhm. Mhm.
I believe. That's first rule. Second rule, of course, is breathe. You have
Right.
to breathe
Right.
all the time. So I think that as you and I explore this, we have something in common about this book. Outside of, you know, both of us are in it,
Mhm.
whether we have a pseudonym or not, or whether we tell people your last name or not. We make, you know, comparisons to you and the Aeneid and you know, Trojan War and so on, which will come in later, of course, as a ready reference. That if you've seen Brad Pitt, you know, in the Iliad, okay, whatever, you know, he's great. I love watching him there, and the way it's shot, very dramatic, right?
Mhm.
He's pulling people around behind his chariot and so on and so on. Is really a nice process. It's like watching a film of yourself,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So that can give you just a bit of objectivity on yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you can, you know, fight the narcissism that goes on, you know, ain't I great? You don't think I'm headed to Hollywood?
Mhm.
Great,
Mhm. Mhm.
good luck. You know, that ain't where it's at, unless that's what you're looking for.
Sure.
But most people don't know what they're looking for when they get to Hollywood,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If they, whatever, that's another subject.
Sure.
But for us, it's a disclosure. It's asking ourselves, or me asking myself, and you are always there to give good sounding board, good feedback on what you're doing, how you're taking it, what you're not taking, which is, of course, the whole drive of the play, right?
Okay.
If you're a truck driver, you know very well that you should pick up speed going downhill so that you can cruise up the next hill,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And to keep you moving and on time, you're going to break the speed limit. It's a given. But if
Mhm.
you're hauling a load, it makes sense
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
long as there's no real slow guys in the lane in front of you,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
use that for your benefit. If not, we'll have to cut a lot of the dialogue that is going on in the trucker's cab about the guy who's going the speed limit in
Right.
front of him.
Right. Right.
So it's a toss up. It's really it's a journey,
Yeah.
right?
That's the point, I believe. It's not it's not particular to any one outcome. It's the process and the journey, and that alone brings value. Saying, hey, this is important, and this brings benefits, and this, like you said, whether it's therapeutical or insight inducing or knowledge gaining, or for whatever reason, artistic expression through creative writing, seems healthy and fun and interesting. Just has so much to give, and it's overlooked as people get so busy with their business strategy. Oh my god, how many sales do we need to make this month? And yeah, that aspect of creative expression is overlooked, or just put on the part-time. You can do that in your own time. Right now you got to get this job done, and if we can induce a change in that as a part of what we do, dialogical services, then I think we'll be doing something that's fun, and it will be fun to those who adopt it and take it on and try it out.
Yep. And I would like to pursue that without the pressure, right?
Sure.
Because in a way, I think what you've just described is Jiffy Lube.
Okay.
You stop, you get your oil changed, you get
Yeah.
lubed,
Uh-huh.
right, and then you're back on the road. So
Sure.
maybe that's our value in some sense, right?
Mhm.
You know that the car will run better when it's all greased up.
Exactly.
Got new oil filter
Yeah.
and fresh oil in there,
Yeah.
and I can feel it when I have my oil changed, right?
Sure.
And maybe I think I don't want to define it, which is part of the sermon I'm giving on starting a business.
Mhm.
Be very careful
Sure.
at the onset. That
Okay.
if you're saying, we change your oil,
Mhm.
but then you have a guy like me come up, right? And it's a BMW, and you use only synthetic oil, right? 040. And he would think, well, you know what? I don't have any oil filters for a BMW, and certainly don't have any synthetic oil. We just use Quaker State, and I put 1040 in everybody's car. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, is that what you thought it was going to be when you decided to open a business changing oil?
Mhm.
Or it's up on the rack, the guy's changing the oil, and you say, do you see anything? I see some transmission fluid dripping out there.
Oh,
Okay, can you manage that as well?
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And not, I mean, that I think is just part of business.
Sure.
Or you're going to say, can you change a 20? And the guy says, your first customer, I did this, I'm just learning, and is he going to come back? Well,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe you should have, worked in a lube shop before you opened your own business,
Mhm. Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So, just being able to deal with the unexpected and the unexpected will also include things that, as I just said, you weren't expecting,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And how you deal with them.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
that's the fun, I think, or the lesson of right of having, I have to figure out how we say this, of enjoying business play. Figure it out ahead of time. Give it some thought. Write it down.
Yeah.
And then when you go to people and you say, here's my business, here's my business, here's my angle towards business play. And they're going to say, well, you were talking about that in there, but you obviously don't realize that, when you're changing that filter, that it's not just the filter because there are O-rings that go in there as well. It's like, you didn't know about O-rings. It's like, no, well, now you do.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So anyway, it's always something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we come in with this angle or, process or service, which we're exploring and finding benefit from. But then once we are in there and saying, okay, how's your story going? Oh yeah, I couldn't get to it because, I've got this problem right now and, the database is down and then if I can say, well, let me have a look at that. And then,
Right.
yeah, see, as we're just, building this relationship around, because we have such a vast experience and knowledge and our own interest and experience and drive, then that's going to come into it. But why they came to us is for this, creative writing experience that we call the business play.
Yep. And it's not, written in stone either.
Sure, that's right.
And I don't think it ever will be, because, everybody is an individual, at least the people that we work with, right?
Yeah.
If they're a machine, which may be something that you can work with better than I can, right? Machines talking to machines, which I understand is already happening, of course, with fuzzy logic or whatever they do, is a whole other approach.
Sure.
Which is not beyond, well, you particularly in this case, of how that works.
Sure.
But still, it has to be programmed. I sound like an old fogey, and well, I remember computers when they first came on the market, and I do. I wrote my first screenplay on a typewriter. God, I wish I had a computer then.
Right.
And a program, it would just save me a lot of time. But now things are different, and that does not mean they will stay the way they are now either.
Sure.
Right? There's always guys like you who are saying, well, this is nice, but how about, it's like, no, Troy, I don't even understand the present program and you're introducing enough, but it's so much better. It's like, okay, fine, I learned it. We go on from there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a good point to, just bring up again, is like the ever-changing world, that, making things easier, making things quicker. So, and it comes down to, I mean, we were talking about the railroad system. So in America, why they became so fundamental is just getting people from A to B quicker.
yeah,
And
right.
now it's in, I know people that have come, millionaires, multi-millionaires, just for moving data from one room to another quicker, or one building to another building, or one part of the country to another country. And they just cut a line through whatever's in their way. And this is what we were talking about with the railroads. That's why they were getting, I guess, that tycoon kind of, because they didn't care what was in their way. They knew they just wanted to go down the line, and it became faster.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not, not to bring any negativity to it at this point, but if we can make people find a faster way of getting their success, whatever that means to them, whether it's developing a company or just finding, inner peace, then you know, helping them get there quicker through creative writing, through business plays, through exploring the services of datalogical services, then, you know, we'll be successful all around.
You know, I'm going to take exception with something you said about speed, right?
Sure.
There may be those who don't care about speed. You know, getting rich, what is it, getting rich overnight or whatever it is, right? There may be those who simply want to experience the experience, right? And they may or may not do anything with it. That's entirely up to them. You know, it's not saying that if you take this class, you're going to be, you know, successful. So much for university degrees, right? If you graduate from Columbia or, you know, California Institute of Integral Studies, you're just going to walk right into, you know, a penthouse and a mahogany desk and, you know, driver who takes care of your Rolls Royce. Well, maybe not, because we have to stay open to the idea that you may find what you're looking for and it may be something you weren't expecting, or you may be dissuaded from doing something simply because you're not good at accounting. You don't like filling out tax forms, you know, and I think I'll leave that subject open because it's, you know, the answers are multifarious, you know, there's no end to all the things that can sidetrack you, you know. In the recent months, you know, I never expected my mother to die unexpectedly, you know. She was wonderful and perfect health, you know, and then suddenly, boom, she's gone. Or, you know, all those kinds of things which can affect you and are unexpected. So when you're doing your business planning, I forget what the present term is, but it's sort of like, can you to a known unknown or an unknown unknown.
Right.
So we can just go down that path forever, right? Well, I didn't think about it. That's because while you were thinking about it or while you were planning it, it didn't exist.
That's right.
Now, how do you deal with it now? You know, and you may have to refigure and reprogram and recalculate and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that we're going to be able to tell you how to be Elon Musk. I don't know how Elon Musk got to be Elon Musk. And it seems, at least from, you know, where I sit, that he's a really careless guy.
Sure.
You know, he's not he's not living in Omaha, right, Nebraska, and doing billion-dollar deals, or what Gates is doing, or, you know, whoever. I really don't care. And, you know, people can come to me and say, you know, you'd be a really great soda jerk. And it's like, you think so? Oh man, you could make millions. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to be a soda jerk. But if you just, you know, flip burgers, man, you know, I know then you'll be manager of the, you know, and then eventually you'll probably end up being on the board of McDonald's. And it's like, that's my fate or my destiny. It's like, oh God, oh no, I think I'll just go back to bed. You know, figure it out. So, okay, there we have it. For today.
Great.
Yep. Let's end our audience and you and I have a quick chat. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thank you.